Chapter 1. The Leap. The moon hung full and merciless above the Cataract Cliffs, turning the raging river below into a ribbon of molten silver. Elara Voss stood on the edge, wind whipping her dark gold hair across her face, the thin white nightgown clinging to her skin like a shroud. Behind her, the torches of Rowan Blackthorn's hunters flickered through the trees, closing fast. She had maybe 30 heartbeats before the hounds caught her scent again. Rowan's scent still clung to her skin, no matter how hard she had scrubbed in the icy stream an hour ago. The claiming bite on the juncture of her neck and shoulder throbbed with every pulse of her heart. A brand that said property even though she was human. Even though the old laws were supposed to protect her kind from exactly this, they had never protected her, not when her father traded her to the Blackthorn pack to settle a blood debt, not when Rowan's claws had torn the gown from her body on the night of the full moon and forced the bond that would never let her run far. Not tonight, when she had slipped wolfsbane into the guard's wine, stolen the keys, and fled barefoot through the forest, with nothing but the clothes on her back and the dagger now clenched in her fist. The first howl rose behind her. Close, to close. Elara looked down. The drop was 80 feet of jagged rock and white roaring water. No one had ever survived the cataract. They said the river itself was alive, that it hungered for the living the way the wolves hungered for flesh. Good. Let it take her. She closed her eyes, tasted salt on her lips that might have been tears or river mist, and whispered the only prayer she had left, "Let me be free." Then she stepped forward into nothing. For one endless second the wind screamed past her ears and the world fell away. Her stomach lurched. The nightgown billowed like broken wings. She had time to regret, time to wonder if death would hurt when a shadow detached itself from the darkness. Below, something huge and impossibly fast surged up from the rocks at the base of the cliff. Elara's scream never left her throat. Massive arms caught her midair, crushing her against a chest that burned hotter than any human should. The impact drove the breath from her lungs. Then they were falling again. No, not falling. The stranger twisted, taking the force of the landing on his own body. As they hit the river's edge in an explosion of icy spray, the world went black. When awareness clawed its way back, she was underwater, lungs already burning. Panic surged. She thrashed wildly, but iron bands locked around her waist and propelled her upward. She broke the surface, choking, gasping, clawing at the arms that held her. A low, inhuman growl vibrated through the chest she was pinned against. "Be still, little one, or you'll drown us both." The voice was gravel and smoke, laced with an ancient accent that made her skin prickle. She tried to turn, to see the face of the man or creature that had caught her, but the river spun them mercilessly. All she glimpsed was moonlit skin, black hair plastered to a strong jaw, and eyes that caught the light like a wolf's gold, predatory and far too knowing. He swam against the current with terrifying strength, one arm clamped around her, the other cutting through the water like a blade. Her soaked nightgown dragged at them both, but he never slowed. When his boots finally scraped the riverbed on the far bank, he rose from the water like some dark god and carried her into the trees without breaking stride. Only when the roar of the cataract faded behind a thick wall of pine did he stop. He set her down on a bed of moss, gentle, despite the raw power radiating from him. Elara's legs gave out instantly. She collapsed to her knees, coughing river water, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Moonlight filtered through the branches in silver shards, painting her rescuer in sharp, dangerous lines. He was enormous, taller than Rowan, broader through the shoulders, dressed in nothing but dark trousers and a torn black shirt that clung to every carved muscle. Water streamed from his hair, down the sharp planes of his face, dripping from a jaw that looked cut from granite. A thin scar ran through his left eyebrow, giving him a permanently sardonic expression, and those eyes, molten gold ringed with black, were fixed on her, with an intensity that stole what little breath she had left. Elara scrambled backward until her spine hit a tree trunk. Her fingers closed around the dagger she'd somehow kept clutched through the fall and the river. She raised it with trembling hands. "Stay back." He didn't move, but one corner of his mouth curved, not quite a smile. More, the acknowledgement of a predator who had already decided the prey wasn't worth chasing. "You're on Blackwood land now," he said, voice low enough to vibrate in her bones. "My land." He tilted his head, inhaling subtly, and his pupils dilated until only a thin ring of gold remained. "And you, little human, are bleeding." Rowan Blackthorn sent from every pore. The dagger wavered in her grip, Then kill me and send my body back to him. I won't go willingly. A muscle ticked in his jaw. The forest around them went unnaturally quiet. As if every creature held its breath, he took one slow step forward, then another, until the blade trembled a hair's breadth from his chest. I don't take orders from Rowan Blackthorn, he said softly. And I don't murder females who've clearly suffered enough. His gaze dropped to the claiming bite on her shoulder, raw, bruised, still oozing blood where she'd tried to cut it out with the same dagger now pointed at his heart. Something dark and lethal flashed across his face. My name is Killian Rex, Alpha of the Blackwood Pack. His voice dropped to a growl that raised every hair on her body. And you just threw yourself off a cliff to escape your mate. He leaned in until she could feel the heat pouring off him, until the dagger pressed hard enough against his skin to draw a single bead of crimson. Tell me, Elara Voss, he whispered, saying her name like he'd known it for years. What kind of monster makes his own fated mate want to die?
Chapter 2. The weight of his silence, ***, the dagger trembled between them, its tip kissing the hollow of Killian Rex's throat. One push, and she could end it, end him, and any chance of being dragged back to Rowan's cage. Her fingers cramped around the bone handle, slick with river water and her own blood. But she didn't push. Killian didn't move either. He stood utterly still, letting her feel the steady thud of his pulse beneath the blade, letting her decide. The moon painted silver across his cheekbones and caught in the wet strands of hair that clung to his neck. Up close he smelled like pine smoke and something wilder, something that made her stomach clench with instinctive fear, and something hotter she refused to name. Answer me, he said again, softer this time. What did he do to you? The question cracked something open inside her chest. No one had asked. Not her father when he'd signed the mating contract. Not the elders who'd looked away while Rowan dragged her, screaming, to the claiming circle. Not even herself. In all the nights she'd lain awake planning this escape. She hated the way her voice shook. Everything. Killian's eyes darkened to liquid amber. A low sound rumbled in his chest. Not quite human. The forest itself seemed to lean in, listening. Then, slowly, he lifted one hand and closed his fingers around the blade, not yanking it away, just holding it, letting the edge bite into his palm until blood welled between his knuckles and dripped onto the moss. He didn't flinch. I'm not him, he said, and I'm not letting you bleed out in my woods because of what he did. He pulled the dagger from her numb fingers with deliberate care and tossed it aside. It landed point down in the earth, quivering. Before she could scramble after it, he crouched, bringing them eye to eye. Let me see the bite. No. The word burst out raw. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hide the torn neckline of the nightgown, the ugly bruise blooming around the torn skin where Rowan's teeth had sunk deep. Killian's jaw flexed. It's infected. Wolf's bane in the blood makes it worse for humans. You'll be dead by dawn if it isn't cleaned. She laughed, a broken sound. That's the idea. Something feral flashed across his face. In one motion he stood, scooped her up, and started walking deeper into the trees. Elara kicked, panic surging anew. Put me down. No. The single word cracked like a whip. You want death, little wolf? Fine. But you'll look me in the eye when you choose it. Not let poison do the work Rowan started. She pounded her fists against his chest, but it was like striking stone. His heartbeat thundered under her palms, too fast, too strong. The heat pouring off him soaked through her soaked gown and into her frozen skin, until she stopped fighting, too exhausted to do anything but sag against him. They walked for what felt like miles. The forest grew older, darker. Trees so wide 3 men couldn't span them. Their branches knitting together overhead until only slivers of moonlight reached the ground. The air smelled of moss and distant snow. Finally, a cabin appeared, half hidden beneath a shelf of granite, built from whole logs and river stone. No lights, no smoke from the chimney. It looked abandoned, but when Killian shouldered the door open, the inside was warm, faintly lit by a banked fire someone had kept alive. He set her on a wide bench beside the hearth. The sudden warmth made her shiver harder. Without a word, he disappeared through a side door and returned with a wooden bowl of steaming water, clean cloth, and a small clay jar. "Kneel," he said. She stayed seated, arms wrapped around her knees. "I don't take orders from alphas anymore." Something flickered in his eyes, pain or recognition. Gone too fast to name. He knelt instead, setting the bowl on the floor between them. "Then let me serve," he said quietly. The words stole her breath. An alpha kneeling to a human. Unthinkable. He waited. When she didn't move, he reached for the torn neckline of her gown. She flinched so violently she nearly toppled backward. "I won't touch the bite unless you let me," he said. "But you're shaking apart. At least let me get you warm." His voice was rough, but the hands that tugged a thick wool blanket from the bench and wrapped it around her shoulders were careful. He kept a deliberate distance, giving her space to bolt if she needed it. Elara stared at the fire. The flames blurred. She hadn't realized she was crying until the first tear slipped off her chin and hissed in the hearth. "I can't go back," she whispered. "He'll never let me go. The bond, it's in my blood now. He'll track me anywhere." Killian was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost too low to hear. "There are older bonds than the one he forced on you." She looked at him then. Really looked. The firelight carved shadows across his face, deepening the scar through his brow, the hollows beneath his cheekbones. His eyes reflected the flames like a wolf's, but there was something ancient in them, something tired. "What does that mean?" she asked. He dipped the cloth in the steaming water, wrung it out. "It means some things can be broken. Some things can be rewritten." He hesitated. "If you're brave enough to bleed a little more." She swallowed. The bite throbbed in time with her pulse, fire under her skin. "Show me," she said. Killian's shoulders rose and fell in a slow breath. He moved closer, slow enough that she could have stopped him a dozen times. When his fingers brushed the edge of the blanket, she didn't flinch. He folded it down just enough to expose the wound. The bite was worse than she'd thought. 4 deep punctures ringed with black, veins spidering outward like poison. He hissed under his breath, a sound of pure rage. "Rowan used silver in the claiming," he said, voice lethal. "He wanted it to scar, wanted you to feel him every time you breathed." He opened the clay jar. The sharp scent of herbs, yarrow, mugwort, something darker, filled the air. "This will burn," he warned. "Do it." He pressed the cloth to the wound. Elara screamed. The pain was white hot, lancing straight to her spine. She would have jerked away, but his free hand settled on the back of her neck, not restraining, just grounding. His thumb stroked once, twice, over the pulse hammering beneath her ear. "Breathe through it," he murmured. "I have you." She didn't want to lean into that touch, didn't want the way her body instinctively turned toward his warmth. But the pain was too big, and his voice was the only steady thing in the world. Minutes or hours later, the burning eased into a dull throb. The black veins had receded to angry red. Killian sat back on his heels, hands stained with her blood and the dark paste. "It's clean," he said. For now. She pulled the blanket tighter, suddenly aware of how close he was. How the firelight painted gold across the bare skin of his throat where his shirt had torn. Aware of the way he watched her. Not like prey, but like something rare and breakable and worth protecting. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You don't know me." Killian looked away, into the fire. The flames danced in his eyes. "Because 20 years ago," he said, voice raw, "someone should have caught my mother before she jumped." The silence that followed was heavier than any howl. Elara's heart cracked open, just a little. Outside, far away, a wolf howled, long and mournful, answered by another, then a third. The hunt was still on. Killian rose in one fluid motion and crossed to the door, listening. "They've crossed the river," he said. "Rowan's trackers." He turned back to her, and for the first time, the predator beneath his skin looked straight at her. Stay here, and I'll kill every wolf he sends. Or come with me deeper into Blackwood, where even he can't follow. Your choice, Elara." She stared at the male who had caught her from the sky, who had knelt in her blood and asked nothing in return for the first time in months. The choice was hers. Chapter 3. The path that has no scent. Elara stood on legs that still trembled. The wool blanket clutched around her shoulders like armor. The fire crackled behind her, throwing long shadows that danced across Killian's face. Outside, the howls rose again closer, threaded with fury. She looked at the dagger he had tossed into the dirt, then at the open door, where moonlight spilled across the threshold like an invitation to run. Killian waited. He did not fill the silence with promises or threats. He simply watched her with those burning gold eyes, patient as stone. "I choose deeper," she said at last. The words tasted like iron and freedom. Something flared in his expression, relief, maybe, or grim satisfaction, and was gone. He nodded once. "Then we move now." He crossed the room in 3 strides, pulled a dark cloak from a peg, and draped it over her shoulders. The fabric swallowed her, heavy with his scent, pine, smoke, and something darker, like a storm held barely in check. The hem dragged on the floor, but it was warm, and for one cowardly heartbeat she wanted to bury her face in it and hide. Killian extinguished the fire with a single bucket of water from a barrel by the door. Darkness swallowed the cabin. When her eyes adjusted, the moonlight revealed him already outside, a silhouette against the trees. He did not look back to see if she followed. She did. The forest closed around them instantly. No path, no trail, just an ancient stillness that felt older than language. The pines here grew so close, their needles formed a roof. The ground was carpeted in centuries of fallen needles that swallowed every footstep. Elara stumbled over roots hidden in shadow. Killian never slowed, yet somehow his hand found hers whenever she faltered, steadying her without a word. They walked for hours, or perhaps only minutes, time blurred under the weight of exhaustion and adrenaline. The howls behind them grew faint, then vanished altogether. Still he pushed on. At some point the trees thinned, revealing a narrow ravine. A stream cut through it, black and silent, reflecting starlight like scattered diamonds. Killian knelt at the bank and dipped his fingers. When he lifted them, the water steamed faintly against the cold air, cold iron in the current. He murmured, "Breaks a wolf's nose. Rowan's trackers won't cross here tonight." Elara's knees finally betrayed her. She sank onto a moss-covered boulder, breath sawing in and out. The cloak had slipped. Moonlight painted the ugly bite on her shoulder in stark relief. It looked less angry now, the skin knitting under whatever dark herbcraft he had used. But the scar would be permanent. Killian crouched opposite her, elbows on his knees. For the first time she noticed the exhaustion in the set of his shoulders, the faint tremor in his hands he hid by clenching them. "You're hurt," she said. He glanced down as if surprised to find blood seeping through a tear in his shirt, his own blood, from where he had taken the impact of their landing against the rocks. The wound ran from ribs to hip, deep enough that she could see the gleam of bone in the moonlight. "It's nothing," he said. "You caught me out of the air." Her voice cracked. "You should be dead." A humorless smile ghosted across his mouth. "Takes more than a river and a few broken ribs to kill me." He reached for the stream again, cupping water to his lips. When he turned back, his eyes had gone distant. "My mother used to bring me here when I was a boy," he said quietly, "before Rowan's father murdered mine and took the Eastern Territories. Before the war split the packs." He stared at the water as though it held memories. She said this stream was older than the moon bond itself, that it remembers every promise ever broken in these woods. Elara hugged her knees to her chest. "Did she jump?" Killian's gaze flicked to her, sharp and pained. "No, she waited until Rowan's father came for her himself. Then she walked into the cataract holding my hand. I was 7. The words fell between them like stones into deep water. Elara felt them sink all the way to her bones. She had thought her pain singular, a private hell. Now she saw it echoed in the rigid line of his shoulders, in the way he could not quite look at her when he spoke of his mother. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be." His voice was rough. "Be angry. Anger keeps you alive." He stood abruptly, as though the confession had scraped him raw. "We need to keep moving. There's a place the old ones built warded. Even Rowan can't track through blood wards." He offered his hand. She took it. His palm was calloused, warm, the blood from his earlier cut already dried. When their fingers laced, something electric shot up her arm, not the sick pull of Rowan's forced bond, but something older, deeper, like the recognition of a song she had always known but never heard. Killian froze. His nostrils flared. For one terrifying second, his eyes bled fully gold, pupils blown wide. "What is that?" she breathed. He released her hand as if it burned. "Nothing," he said too quickly. "Fatigue. Come." But she had felt it, a thread, invisible and unbreakable, tugging at something behind her ribs. The same thread that had made her pause on the cliff when the wind carried his scent up from below. They walked again, but the silence between them now carried weight. Dawn was still hours away when the forest opened into a clearing ringed by standing stones taller than a man. Runes glowed faintly along their surfaces, silver one moment, blood red the next. At the center stood a small, roofless temple of black stone, half swallowed by ivy. Killian stopped at the edge of the circle. "Sanctuary," he said. "No violence can cross these stones. Not while the moon watches." Elara stepped forward, drawn by the hush that fell over the clearing. The moment her foot crossed the boundary, warmth flooded through her like stepping into sunlight after years in a cellar. The ache in her shoulder eased. The lingering poison in her blood quieted. Dot behind her. Killian did not follow. She turned. He stood just outside the stones, jaw tight, hands clenched at his sides. "What's wrong?" "The wards were set by my mother's line," he said. "They know blood. They know truth." His throat worked. "I can't enter until I speak it aloud." Ilara's heart began to pound. "Speak what?" He met her eyes, and for the first time the Alpha looked almost afraid. "That when you fell tonight, something in me woke up and roared your name before I even knew it." His voice cracked like breaking ice. "That every instinct I have is screaming that you are mine, not claimed, not forced, but mine by the oldest law the moon ever wrote. And I have spent 20 years swearing I would never take a mate after what happened to my mother." The clearing spun around her. Dot faded. Dot, the word Rowan had spat like a curse while he held her. Down. Dot, the word the elders had laughed at, saying humans could never truly trigger the soul bond. Elara took one involuntary step back. The warmth of the sanctuary suddenly felt suffocating. "You're lying," she said. "It's a trick." "Another cage? I wish to every god it were," Killian rasped. "I caught your scent on the wind hours before you jumped. I was already running toward the cliff before I understood why. That's why I was there, Elara. Not chance. Not kindness. Fate." His chest heaved. Blood seeped anew through his shirt, brighter now, as though the confession had torn the wound wider. "I will not claim you," he said fiercely. "Not like he did. I will stand outside these stones and bleed until the moon sets if that is what you need. But I will not lie to you. Not ever." The runes flared brighter, as if the stones themselves were listening. Elara stared at the male on the edge of sanctuary, bleeding, trembling, offering her the one thing no one ever had: the truth and the choice. Moonlight silvered the tears on her cheeks she hadn't realized were falling. "Killian," she whispered. His name on her tongue sounded like the beginning of something too large to name. *** Chapter 4. The moon's confession ***. The standing stones hummed, low and ancient, as though the earth itself inhaled and held its breath. Elara stood inside the circle, barefoot on frost-cold marble, the cloak slipping from one shoulder. The bite mark on her neck throbbed in rhythm with her pulse, but the pain felt distant now, muffled by something larger, something that terrified her more than Rowan ever had. Killian remained on the boundary, one boot planted just outside the ring of runes. Blood dripped steadily from his side, pattering onto the dead leaves like slow rain. His eyes had not left her face since the confession tore out of him. "Say something," he rasped. The words stuck in her throat. She had spent months learning to keep her mouth shut, to swallow screams, to make herself small. Speaking truth felt like stepping off another cliff. "I don't know how to believe you," she finally whispered. Every time someone said the word fate, it came with chains. Killian's shoulders sagged, not in defeat, but in understanding so deep it looked like grief. "I know," he said, "and I will not cross this line until you ask me to. Not tonight. Not ever, if that is your will." His voice cracked on the last word. "But the moon is climbing, and the bond is loud. If I stay out here much longer, the wolf will try to answer whether I want it to or not." He pressed a hand to his ribs. The shirt was soaked crimson now. The scent of his blood rich, wild, edged with something electric drifted across the boundary and curled inside her lungs like smoke. Elara took one hesitant step toward him. The runes dimmed as though granting permission. "Let me see the wound," she said. A startled huff escaped him, half laugh, half groan. "You're worried about me now. You're bleeding on sacred ground. That feels disrespectful." The corner of his mouth twitched. He unbuttoned the ruined shirt with stiff, careful movements and let it fall open. The gash ran from just beneath his left pectoral to the sharp cut of his hip, deep, ugly, already knitting at the edges with unnatural speed, but not fast enough. Shards of river stone were still embedded in the flesh. Ilara's stomach lurched. "You did this catching me." "I'd do worse to keep you breathing," he said simply. She crossed the remaining distance until only the invisible ward separated them, close enough to see the faint tremor in his jaw, the way his pupils had swallowed the gold entirely. "May I?" she asked, extending her hand. Killian searched her face for traps, for fear, for any sign she was acting out of obligation. Finding none, he gave a single, tight nod. She stepped over the boundary. The moment her bare foot touched the earth outside the stones, the night exhaled. The bond snapped taut between them, visible almost, a thread of molten light only they could see. Killian swayed, breath hissing through his teeth. Elara felt it too, a pull behind her sternum, gentle but inexorable, like the tide claiming the shore. Her palms settled over the worst of the laceration. His skin burned fever hot. Beneath it, muscle and bone shifted subtly, trying to heal around the foreign stone. "Hold still," she murmured. She had no herbs, no water, only the river chilled hem of her nightgown and the stubborn will that had kept her alive this long. She tore a strip from the already ruined fabric, folded it, and pressed hard against the deepest part of the wound. Killian's head fell back. A low, involuntary growl rumbled out of him, not pain, but something roar. His hand came up, not to stop her, but to cover hers, pinning her palm against his skin. His claws pricked through the pads of his fingers, not breaking skin, just anchoring. Minutes passed, measured only by the slowing drip of blood and the thud of two hearts learning the same rhythm. When she finally pulled away, the bleeding had eased to a sluggish seep. The edges of the wound glowed, faintly silver moon healing. "Older than medicine. Better," she said. Killian's eyes were closed. "You smell like starlight and storm," he whispered, almost too low to hear. "I have never wanted anything the way I want to keep you safe." The honesty flayed her. She rested her forehead against his collarbone, just for a second, breathing him in. He shuddered but did not move to hold her. "I'm still afraid of you," she admitted into the warm skin of his throat. "I know, but I think I'm more afraid of being alone tonight." His arms rose slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, until they settled around her with exquisite care as if she were made of glass and wildfire at once. She let herself sag against him. The top of her head barely reached his sternum. He curved around her like living armor. Above them, the moon reached its zenith, full and merciless and ancient. Killian spoke against her hair, voice ragged. There's a price for what I am, Elara. A secret I've carried alone since I was 16. If you stay with me, it will touch you too. I need you to understand that before you decide anything more. She tilted her head back. Tell me. Not here. He glanced at the sky. When the moon sets, the bond quiets enough for thought. Until then, he swallowed. Until then, let me simply hold you. Nothing more. I swear it on my mother's grave. Elara studied the fierce lines of his face. The exhaustion he could not quite hide. The way his arms trembled with the effort of gentleness. She nodded. He lifted her again, this time cradling her against his chest as carefully as something sacred, and carried her back across the boundary. The stones brightened in greeting. Inside the roofless temple, soft grass grew knee-high, silvered by moonlight. He sank down with her in his lap, back against one of the inner pillars, ranging the cloak so it cocooned them both. The night settled into stillness. Somewhere far off, an owl called. Closer, the stream whispered its iron secrets. Elara's head rested over his heart. The beat was too fast, too strong, more like a war drum than anything human. She traced one of the older scars that crossed his ribs, pale against the bronze of his skin. Will you tell me how you got this one? She asked softly, a low, broken laugh. Battles. Stupid choices. Trying to outrun grief with teeth and claws. His fingers threaded gently through her hair, untangling river snags with infinite patience. I was not always careful with my life after my mother was gone. She pressed her lips to the scar, a feather-light benediction. His breath stuttered. And this one? She touched the thin line through his eyebrow. Rowan's cousin, he said, voice suddenly flat. The night they came for the Eastern Pack. I was 12, too small to shift yet. He thought it would be funny to mark the pup who would never be Alpha. Elara's hand stilled. Rage clean, bright, protective flared in her chest. She sat up enough to cup his face between her palms. They were wrong, she said fiercely. You are Alpha. I felt it the moment you caught me, and you are nothing like them. Gold bled back into his irises. For a heartbeat, his features flickered, cheekbones sharpening, teeth lengthening before he wrestled the wolf down. Careful, little star, he whispered. You say things like that, and the bond sings so loud I can barely hear my own thoughts. She did not move her hands from his face, then let it sing. I'm tired of being afraid of songs. The moon began its slow descent toward the ridge, painting them both in fading silver. Killian closed his eyes, resting his forehead against hers. When dawn comes, he said, voice raw, I will tell you why no Blackwood Alpha has taken a mate in 20 years. I will tell you what I am hiding under this skin. And then, if you want to walk away, I will carve a path through Rowan's entire pack myself to see you safe to the human border. Elara felt the truth of it settle in her bones. Whatever secret he carried, it was heavy enough to break him. She curled tighter against his chest, listening to the wild thunder of his heart. I'm not going anywhere, she said. Not until I hear it all. Outside the circle of stones, the forest held its breath, waiting for the sun. Chapter 5. The mark beneath the mark, the sky over the sanctuary turned the color of old bruises. Just before true dawn, the moon slipped behind the western ridge, and with it the wild singing in their blood quieted to a hush, like a tide pulling back to reveal what had always lain beneath. Elara felt the change first in Killian's body. The fever heat that had burned against her all night cooled. The tremor in his arms stilled. He drew one slow breath, then another, as though surfacing from deep water. It's time, he said against her temple. She nodded, but neither of them moved to rise. They stayed curled together on the soft grass of the ruined temple. The cloak tangled around their legs, her cheek over his heart. His heartbeat had slowed to something almost human. I need to show you, he murmured. Words alone won't be enough. A shiver traced her spine, not fear. Exactly. But anticipation sharp as winter air. She sat up, pushing hair from her face. The bite on her shoulder ached dully, but the skin around it was no longer angry. A faint silver ring had begun to form beneath the scab, like moonlight trapped under flesh. Killian rose first, offering his hand. She took it. His palm was rough, stained with both their blood, yet the grip was careful, reverent. He led her out of the inner circle to the easternmost standing stone. Runes here were older than the rest, worn smooth by centuries of rain, yet they glimmered faintly when he laid his free hand against the rock. Blackwood blood wakes them. He said, "Watch." The stone warmed under his touch. A loathsome vibrated up through the soles of her feet. Lines of silver crawled across the granite like roots, forming a pattern she had never seen, a spiral that ended in a crescent moon. Pierced by a single claw, Killian turned to her. Dawn's first light caught the scar through his eyebrow, turned his eyes the color of dark honey. "My mother was not born Blackwood," he began, voice low. "She was born Silvermere, the last true daughter of the Moon-Blessed line. The ones who could speak to the moon itself, who carried its mark from birth." He released the stone and reached for the waistband of his trousers. Elara's breath caught, but he only tugged the fabric low enough to reveal the sharp cut of his hip bone, and the mark branded there, a crescent moon, perfect and luminous, no larger than a coin. But unlike any tattoo or scar she had ever seen, it glowed softly from within, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. The Moon-Blessed were hunted to extinction during the last pack wars. He continued. Rowan's father wanted their power. When he couldn't take it, he slaughtered them instead. My mother survived only because she hid among humans until she was old enough to run. He let the fabric fall back into place. But the afterimage of the mark burned behind Elara's eyes. "She mated my father to protect what was left of her line," he said. "But the moon does not forgive genocide. When I was 16, it spoke." Killian's voice roughened. He turned away, staring toward the ridge where the first sliver of sun bled gold across the sky. Eyes shifted for the first time under a blood moon, not into a normal wolf. He laughed, a sound like breaking glass, into something the old stories call a Rex Luporum, a moon king, bigger, older, tied directly to the source. He faced her again, and the anguish in his eyes was a living thing. "The power comes with a price. Elara, every alpha of Blackwood since my mother's death has gone mad by their 30th year. The moon fills us until we burst. My father tried to end it, walked into the cataract with silver chains around his throat. When I was 12, I found his body weeks later, tangled in the roots downstream." Elara's throat closed. She remembered the weight of his earlier words. "Someone should have caught my mother. And you?" she asked. "You're 28 now. 29 next moon," he said quietly. "I've felt it growing for years. The hunger, the rage. I've stayed away from the pack, away from anything soft, because I knew one day I would break and take everything I love with me." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the faint silver threads beginning to spread beneath. The skin of his throat like cracks in marble filled with starlight. "That's why no Blackwood Alpha has taken a mate in 20 years, he whispered. "Because we destroy what we love most. And the moon has never chosen a human before." His gaze dropped to her shoulder, to the silver ring forming beneath Rowan's brutal bite. "Until you." Elara's heart slammed against her ribs. She lifted trembling fingers to the wound. The skin was warm, the new mark pulsing in perfect counterpoint to the one on Killian's hip. "What does it mean?" she asked. "It means the moon is trying to rewrite the curse," he said, voice raw. "Through you, through us. I don't know if it's salvation or a crueler death." He sank to his knees in front of her, not in submission but in exhaustion, forehead resting against her stomach. His hands hovered at her hips, afraid to touch. "I caught you because I had to," he said into the fabric of the cloak. "But I will let you go because I must. If being near me will kill you the way it killed them." Elara's hands moved before her mind caught up. She cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. I have spent the last year learning exactly how it feels to be destroyed by someone who claimed to own me, she said fiercely. You are not him. You knelt in my blood and asked nothing. You stood outside sanctuary and bled rather than lie to me. Whatever this is, curse, blessing, madness, I choose it. I choose you. Killian made a broken sound and pressed his face harder against her, arms finally wrapping around her waist as though she were the only solid thing in a tilting world. She felt the tremor that ran through him. Wolf and man both lay bare. Above them, the sun breached the ridge fully, spilling liquid gold across the clearing. The standing stones drank it in, runes flaring one final time before settling into ordinary granite. Killian lifted his head. Dawn light caught the silver threads beneath his skin, and for the first time, they did not look like cracks. They looked like roots. He rose slowly, never breaking her gaze. There's one more thing, he said. The only way to know if the moon is truly rewriting the curse is to finish what it started. Elara's breath caught. She knew what he meant. The claiming, not forced, not brutal, but mutual. The exchange of marks that would bind them under the old law. She searched his face for any hint of coercion and found only terror and hope in equal measure. I will wait 100 years if I must, he said. But Rowan will come for you by the next moon. And if the bond between us is not sealed, his claim will still have power. He brushed a thumb across her lower lip, the gentlest touch he had ever given her. Tell me to wait, Elara, and I will. Tell me never, and I will carve my own heart out to set you free. But if you choose this, if you choose me, know that I will spend whatever life the moon grants me proving I am worthy of it. The clearing held its breath again. Elara felt the new mark on her shoulder flare, warm and answering, like a second heartbeat. She rose on tiptoes and pressed her mouth to his, not a kiss of surrender, but of claiming. When she pulled back, her voice did not shake. I'm not asking you to wait, Killian Rex, she said. I'm asking you to catch me again. The sun climbed higher, gilding them both in fierce, forgiving light. Chapter 6. The claiming that was not a claim. The sun hung just above the treetops. A coin of molten gold balanced on the edge of the world. Inside the ring of standing stones, the air itself seemed to wait. Killian's hands rose to cradle Elara's face as though she were made of dawn light and might dissolve. If he breathed too hard, his thumbs brushed the tear tracks on her cheeks, tears she hadn't felt fall. You are certain? He asked, voice scraped raw. There is no undoing this. Once the moon accepts us, Rowan's mark will burn away forever. But mine will never fade either. Elara leaned into his palm. I have worn a mark I never chose for long enough. Let me choose this one. A shudder ran through him, relief so violent it looked like pain. He rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed, breathing her in as though memorizing the scent of freedom. Then not like he did it. Killian whispered, never like that. He sank slowly to his knees again, but this time he bowed his head, offering his own throat in a gesture no Alpha had ever given a human in living memory. The strong column of his neck, the pulse hammering beneath bronze skin, the faint silver threads glowing brighter now, everything laid bare. Mark me first, he said, so the moon knows this bond is equal. Elara's heart cracked open at the sight. She had expected hunger, possession, the same brutal dominance Rowan had worn like cologne. Instead, she was being handed the blade. Her fingers shook as she pushed the heavy cloak from his shoulders. It pooled on the grass like spilled night. Dawn painted every scar, every ridge of muscle. The terrible beauty of the wound he had taken for her now close to a thin silver line. She traced it with reverent fingertips. Killian's breath hitched, but he held still, letting her explore. When she reached the waistband of his trousers, she hesitated only a moment before tugging it down just enough to expose the glowing crescent. On his hip, it pulsed like a second heart. She bent and pressed her lips to its oft, deliberate. The mark flared white hot beneath her mouth. Killian groaned, a sound torn from the deepest part of him. His hands fisted in the grass, claws pricking through. Elara. She rose, cupping his jaw, guiding his face up to hers. My turn. He stood slowly, towering over her. Yet the power between them had shifted so completely it felt as though she were the taller one. Killian brushed the cloak from her shoulders in turn. The nightgown beneath was little more than rags now, clinging to her body with river water and blood. He peeled it away with the same reverence he might have shown a sacred relic, until she stood bare in the morning light. The ugly claiming bite on her shoulder looked obscene against her pale skin, for jagged holes ringed with bruises. Killian's eyes bled fully gold at the sight, a snarl building in his chest. I will replace it, he said, voice shaking with rage and wonder, with something that never hurts you again. He dropped to his knees once more, but this time his arms slid around her waist, pulling her close. His mouth hovered over the ruined mark, breath warm against torn skin. Tell me to stop at any moment, he whispered, and I will. Then he kissed the wound, not teeth, not yet, just lips, gentle and worshipful, tracing every bruise as though apologizing for every second she had suffered. Elara's hands threaded through his hair, holding him there. Tears slipped free again, but they felt like cleansing, only when she was trembling. When the bond between them sang so loudly, the stones themselves seemed to hum. Did he let his teeth lengthen? Not the brutal tearing Rowan had used, but a slow, deliberate press for points of pressure that asked rather than demanded. Elara. He breathed against her skin. May I? Yes. The bite was exquisite pain and pleasure braided so tightly she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. She cried out, arching into him, fingers digging into his shoulders. Silver fire poured from the wound, racing across her collarbone, down her arm, pooling in her chest like liquid starlight. Killian's arms locked around her as the old mark burned away. She felt Rowan's claim snap like rotted rope felt the last tether to her cage dissolve into nothing. The relief was so sharp it stole her breath. When Killian pulled back, the skin of her shoulder was smooth except for a perfect crescent, luminous and glowing, twin to the one on his hip. His eyes were wide, stunned, as though he hadn't truly believed the moon would accept a human. Elara touched the new mark. It didn't hurt. It felt like coming home. Killian rose slowly, cupping her face again. Your turn, he said, voice rough with awe. She didn't hesitate. Rising on her toes, she pressed her mouth to the strong column of his throat, right over the frantic beat of his pulse. She felt him swallow, felt the moment he surrendered completely. Her teeth human, blunt closed gently over the skin, not breaking it, but marking all the same. Killian's knees buckled. He caught himself against the nearest standing stone, a broken sound tearing from his throat. The crescent on his hip flared so brightly it lit both of them in white fire. When she released him, a perfect crescent bloomed beneath her lips, her claim, human yet undeniable, glowing silver against his skin. The bond locked into place with an almost audible snap. For one endless heartbeat, the world held still. Then the standing stones blazed, every rune igniting at once. Silver and gold and blood red, light pouring upward into the dawn sky like a pillar. Somewhere far away, wolves began to howl in answer, not in warning, but in recognition. Killian pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair. She felt him shaking great. Wrenching sobs he tried to muffle against her skin. It didn't kill you, he rasped. The moon took you and didn't kill you. Elara clung to him just as fiercely. It didn't kill you either. They stood wrapped together while the light slowly faded and the stones settled back into silence. When Killian finally drew back, his eyes were red-rimmed but clear. Centuries of grief finally given permission to ease. He brushed a thumb across her lower lip, wonder in every line of his face. Hello, mate, he whispered. Elara smiled small, shaky, but real. Hello, my heart. The sun climbed higher, gilding them both in fierce, forgiving light. but in the distance. Beyond the sanctuary wards, a single howl rose closer than any before. Threaded with possessive fury, Rowan had found the river crossing. Killian's arms tightened around her. The wolf looked out of his eyes now, calm and unafraid. "Let him come," he said softly. "He will learn what happens when someone tries to take what the moon itself has claimed." Elara rose on her toes and kissed him slow. Deliberate. A promise and a warning at once. Together, they stepped out of the circle of stones, barefoot and bare-skinned and glowing like twin moons, ready to meet whatever came next. Chapter 7. The scent of coming war they walked hand in hand through the ancient forest, no longer fleeing. The morning was crisp, the sky a washed-out winter blue, and every breath tasted of pine and snow. Elara wore Killian's cloak again, belted at her waist with a strip torn from her ruined nightgown. He walked bare-chested despite the cold, the new crescent on his throat shining like a beacon. Their marks pulsed in quiet harmony, to halves of the same song. Neither spoke of what they had just done. Words felt too small for the thing that now lived between them, ancient, luminous, unbreakable. Killian's stride had changed. The terrible tension that had ridden his shoulders for years was gone. In its place was a coiled readiness. The calm of a predator who finally knows exactly what he is protecting. He stopped once, suddenly, head tilting as though listening to something only he could hear. A faint smile curved his mouth. "The pack feels it," he said. "They felt the stones sing. They're coming to us." Elara's stomach fluttered. "Will they accept a human Luna?" "They will accept the moon's choice," he answered, and there was iron beneath the gentleness. "Or they will answer to me." He brushed a thumb across her lower lip, the gesture already familiar, already necessary. "But first, we go home." "Home," he said, as though it were a place she already belonged. They walked until the trees parted and the land fell away into a wide, hidden valley. Mist rose from a crescent-shaped lake fed by a waterfall that spilled silver from the cliffs above. Cabins, some small, some grand, were scattered along the shore and up the wooded slopes, built from dark timber and river stone. Smoke curled from chimneys. Wolves, some in fur, some in skin, moved between the houses with purposeful grace. When Killian and Elara appeared on the ridge, every head turned. Silence rippled outward like a stone dropped in still water. Then a massive gray wolf near the lake threw back his head and howled a sound of pure joy. Others took it up until the valley rang with welcome. Children darted from doorways. Elders stepped onto porches with tears on withered cheeks. Killian's fingers tightened around hers. "Stay close," he murmured. "They want to touch you, to scent the bond. It's overwhelming the first time." He was not wrong. They were swarmed the moment they reached the valley floor. Hands reached not to grab, but to brush fingertips across Elara's hair, her cloak, the glowing crescent at her throat. Voices rose in the old tongue, blessings and prayers and stunned laughter. A woman with silver-streaked braids and Killian's golden eyes pushed through the crowd. She took one look at her son, at the peace in his face. The mark on his throat hand burst into open weeping. Killian folded her into his arms without a word. Elara's own eyes burned. This was what family was supposed to feel like. Eventually, Killian raised a hand. The valley quieted instantly. "Tonight," he called, voice carrying effortlessly, "we feast. Tonight we celebrate that the moon has not abandoned Blackwood." His gaze swept the crowd and settled on Elara. "And tomorrow, we prepare for war." A ripple of grim understanding passed through the pack. Rowan would come. Everyone knew it. They gave the new Luna and her Alpha the largest cabin on the lake, raised on stilts above the water, wrapped by a wide porch. Inside smelled of cedar and wood smoke. A huge bed dominated one corner, furs piled deep. Someone had already filled the copper tub by the hearth with steaming water scented with pine and rosemary. Killian closed the door and leaned against it, watching her with quiet hunger. "You're home," he said simply. Elara's throat tightened. She crossed the room and pressed her palms to his bare chest. right over the steady thunder of his heart. "So are you." He kissed her then slow, reverent, tasting of gratitude and wonder. When they parted, foreheads still touching, he whispered, "I need to wash the river and the blood off us both. Will you let me?" She nodded. He undressed her with the same deliberate care he had shown in the sanctuary, fingers tracing every bruise Rowan had left as though erasing them one by one. When she stood naked, he lifted her into the tub as easily as if she weighed nothing and climbed in behind her. The water rose to their shoulders. For a long time, they simply sat, her back to his chest, his arms banded around her waist. He washed her hair with calloused hands that trembled slightly, rinsed the last of the river from her skin, kissed the new crescent on her shoulder until she was boneless against him. Only when the water began to cool did he speak again, voice low against her ear. "There is one more secret," he said, "one I have never told another living soul." Elara turned in the circle of his arms, water sloshing gently. "Tell me." Killian's eyes were ancient. "The Moon King is not just stronger. He is contagious. The old texts say that if he claims a true mate, if the bond is accepted by the moon itself, some of that power bleeds into her. Slowly, irrevocably." He took her hand and pressed it over his heart. Beneath her palm, something vast and wild stirred, not wolf, but something older, starborn. "I felt it the moment our marks locked," he said. "You are changing, Elara. Not into a wolf, never that, but into something the world has not seen since the first Silvermere. Walked under moonlight, and when Rowan comes, he will sense it. He will want it. He will try to take you again, not for territory, but for what you are becoming." Elara felt it then, a low, liquid heat uncoiling behind her ribs, answering the thing inside him. Her vision sharpened. The fire in the hearth suddenly burned in 1,000 impossible colors. The sound of waves against the stilts below became music. She met Killian's gaze, unafraid. "Then let him come," she said, and her voice carried an echo that was not entirely human. "I have teeth now, too." Killian's breath left him in a rush. He pulled her close, burying his face against her wet throat, and laughed, stunned, joyous. Outside, the pack was already gathering wood for the bonfire. Drums began to thrum, low and steady as a heartbeat. Inside, the new Luna and her Moon King held each other in scented water and learned the shape of the power that now lived in both their blood. And on the far side of the valley, unseen, a single black wolf with ice-blue eyes watched from the tree line. Rowan's smile was slow and terrible. He had smelled the shift in the wind. The game had just become interesting. Chapter 8. The feast and the shadow night fell like a velvet blade over Blackwood Valley. Torches ringed the lakeshore, their reflections trembling on black water. A massive bonfire roared at the center of the gathering ground, sparks spiraling upward to mingle with the stars. Drums beat in slow, primal rhythm, heartbeat of the pack, heartbeat of the land. Elara stood at Killian's side on the raised platform of the Alpha's porch, wrapped in a dress someone had left folded on the bed, deep silver green, soft as water, cut low in the back so the glowing crescent at her nape was visible to every wolf present. Her hair had been braided with tiny moonstones that caught the firelight. She looked like something half wild and half holy, and every gaze that found her softened with awe. Killian wore only dark trousers and the pelt of a white winter wolf across his shoulders. The new mark on his throat shone brighter than any torch. When he lifted a hand for silence, the valley fell instantly quiet. "Tonight," he said, voice rolling out like thunder over still water, "we do not mourn what was taken from us. Tonight we celebrate what the moon has returned." He turned to Elara and took her hand, raising it high so all could see their joined fingers. "My mate," he declared, "your Luna, chosen by the oldest law, accepted by the stones themselves. Any who doubt step forward now." Not a single wolf moved. Instead, they sank to their knees as one, heads bowed, a ripple of submission and joy. Elara's throat closed. She had expected suspicion, fear, maybe hatred. Instead, she was being offered belonging without condition. Killian's mother Lyra approached the platform carrying an ancient silver cup filled with dark, fragrant wine. She offered it first to Elara. "Drink, daughter," she said softly, tears shining. "And know you are home." Elara drank. The wine tasted of blackberries and midnight, and warmth spread through her limbs like liquid sunlight. When Killian drank after her, the pack rose with a roar that shook snow from the pines. Then the feast began. Tables groaned under venison and salmon, winter roots roasted in ash, bread still steaming from stone ovens. Pups darted between legs. Elders told stories of the old wars and older loves. Musicians drew bows across bone-stringed fiddles, and wolves in bull forms danced beneath the moon. Killian never left her side. He fed her from his own fingers honeyed meat, tart berries watching her mouth with a hunger that had nothing to do with food. When she laughed at something a child said, he looked stunned, as though laughter were a miracle he had forgotten existed. Later, when the drums grew faster and the wine flowed freer, he pulled her into the circle of dancers. She expected awkwardness. She had never danced barefoot on packed earth before. But the new power in her blood answered the rhythm like it had been waiting all her life. Killian spun her, caught her, lifted her clear off the ground so her braid flew like a banner. Round them the pack howled approval. Firelight painted them both in gold and shadow. And for the first time since she was a child, Elara felt utterly, incandescently alive. Much later, when the fire burned low and many had shifted to fur to curl together for warmth, Killian led her away from the dying embers. They walked along the lake shore until the music was only a faint heartbeat behind them. He stopped beneath a stand of ancient hemlock, moonlight silvering the needles overhead. "I need to tell you the rest," he said quietly. "Before tomorrow." Elara's stomach tightened. She had felt the shadow all evening, something watching from the tree line, patient and cold. "Rowan is closer than we thought," Killian continued. "Scouts found his scent on the northern ridge at dusk. He brought 30 wolves, maybe more." He took both her hands, grip fierce. "But that is not the worst of it." He turned her gently, pushing aside the fall of her braid to expose the back of her neck. Cool air-kissed skin, and then his fingers brushed something that made her gasp. A second mark had appeared while they danced, not a crescent this time. A crown, delicate, luminous, formed of moon-silver lines that curled from the base of her skull down between her shoulder blades. Like living filigree, it pulsed when he touched it, sending sparks along every nerve. "The queen's crown," he whispered, voice ragged with fear and reverence. "The final piece of the old prophecy. The moon-blessed queen who would stand." Chapter 9. The crown and the fall the valley held its breath. Dawn bled crimson across the eastern ridge, the color of old blood and new war. Blackwood wolves moved in silent, practice formation, archers on the cliffs, warriors along the lake's edge, pups and elders already hidden deep in the mountain caves. The air smelled of pine, steel, and the coming snow. Elara stood on the Alpha's porch, barefoot in the silver-green dress now torn at the hem for movement. The queen's crown on her back burned like living fire, every line of it awake and singing. She felt the valley's heartbeat beneath her soles, felt every wolf's fear and fierce loyalty braided into her own pulse. Killian stepped out beside her, shirtless, the white wolf pelt clasped at his throat. His eyes had gone permanently molten, no human brown left. The Moon King looked out of them now, ancient and unafraid. Rowan's howl split the morning, close enough to rattle the windows. Killian brushed a kiss across the crown mark at her nape. "Whatever happens," he said against her skin, "you are my home. Remember that." Then he leapt from the porch, shifting midair. Where the man had been, a monstrous wolf exploded into being taller than any horse. Black as the void between stars, silver fire running in veins beneath his fur. The Moon King in truth. The pack answered with a roar that shook snow from the pines. Rowan's wolves poured over the ridge like a black tide. The battle was brutal and swift. Teeth and claws, silver arrows and ancient wards, blood steaming on frost. Elara stood at the heart of it. No weapon but the power that now lived in her blood. She raised her arms, and the queen's crown blazed so brightly it turned night to noon. Every Blackwood wolf felt strength flood their limbs. Wounds began to close. Fear burned away. Rowan himself came last huge, white as winter death. Ice blue eyes fixed on Elara with possessive madness. He shifted to man form 20 paces away, naked and scarred and smiling like a blade. "You wear my bite prettily, little human," he called. "Come back to me, and I'll let the rest of them live." Killian snarled, a sound that cracked stone, but Elara stepped forward. "No," she said, and her voice carried the weight of every moon that had ever risen. "You will kneel." The crown on her back flared. Rowan staggered as though struck. Silver light poured from Elara's palms, wrapping around him like chains forged of starlight. He fought gods, how he fought claws raking the air, teeth bared in fury. But the moon had chosen its queen, and the earth itself rose to obey her. Roots erupted from the frozen ground, binding his wrists, his ankles. The lake surged up in a single wave and slammed him to his knees. Rowan's wolves faltered, then dropped one by one, throats bared in instinctive submission. Elara walked forward until she stood over him. The crown's light revealed every lie he had ever told her, every bruise he had left. "You wanted a queen," she said softly. "You got one." She placed her hand on his forehead. Silver fire poured into him, not pain, but truth. Every memory of every female he had broken, every life he had taken, every promise he had twisted. Rowan screamed as the weight of it crushed him. When she lifted her hand, his eyes were no longer blue. They were empty. "I strip you of rank, of name, of pack," Elara said. "Live as the rogue you always were. The moon will never answer you again." The bindings dissolved. Rowan collapsed, sobbing, human and broken. Two Blackwood wolves dragged him away into exile. Silence fell, broken only by the wind. Elara turned to find Killian Man again watching her with stunned reverence. Blood streaked his chest, but his wounds were already closing. He dropped to one knee. Head bowed. Every wolf in the valley followed. "My queen," he whispered. Elara's heart cracked open and spilled light. She walked to him, cupped his face, and pulled him to his feet. "My king," she answered. They kissed in the ruins of the battlefield slow, fierce, tasting of blood and snow and forever. Around them the pack rose with a howl of pure triumph that rolled across the mountains and scattered the dawn clouds. Later, much later, when the dead were honored and the wounded tended, they stood together on the same porch where the story had truly begun. Snow had begun to fall. Soft and silent, Killian wrapped the white wolf pelt around both of them. "Peace?" Elara asked, voice small with wonder. "For now," he said, lips against her temple. "Until the next moon calls us." She turned in his arms, fingers tracing the crescent at his throat that matched her own. "Then let it call," she said. "We will answer together." Above them, the sky cleared to perfect winter blue. Somewhere far away, a lone wolf howled lost, broken, forgotten in Blackwood Valley. The Moon King and his Silver Queen held each other beneath the gentle snow, to hearts finally, fiercely, eternally whole. The curse was broken. The crown had found its bearer, and the Moon Ancient, wild and kind at last, smiled down on the home it had waited centuries to see restored.